Good morning. The responsive reading today is a famous Einstein quote that we hear a lot, but I found a different translation of the few lines from the German, so I wanted to share it with you today. A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feeling as something separated from the rest.
A kind of optical delusion of his consciousness.
The striving to free oneself of this delusion is the one issue of true religion.
Not to nourish the delusion, but to try to overcome it is the way to reach the attainable measure of peace of mind.
Funny the thoughts I have at night, so different from the thoughts I have by day. The moment Mama switches off the light, 1,000 different questions come my way and stay. Who am I? Was it all planned in advance, or was I just born by chance in July? Oh, who on earth am I? Did I ever live before as a mountain lion or as a fly? My friends only think of fun. They're all such incurable taunts. Can I be the only one who thinks these mysterious thoughts? Someday I'll die. Will I ever live again as a rooster or a hen, or a lion in a den, or a robin, or a wren, or a fly? Oh, who am I? I just found out today that I'm a person too, like you. I like balloons. Lots of people like balloons, but everyone says, isn't she cute? She likes balloons. I'm a person too, like you. I like things that everyone likes. I like soft things and movies and horses and warm things and red things. Don't you? I have lots of thoughts, like what's behind the sky, And what's behind the sky? But everyone says, isn't she sweet? She wants to know everything, don't you? Of course, I'm very young to be saying all these things in front of so many people like you. But I'm a person too, though I'm only 10 years old. I'm a person too, like you.
Thanks for welcoming me here today. I appreciate it. I teach undergraduates. I am used to roaming about and running into the aisles and trying to keep them awake. I teach a 3-hour lecture. So that's a challenge. We use a lot of caffeine and other stimulants, but we get through it. So I'm going to try to stay very still and speak very slowly to you, but my nature is to jump and to move, so I will try to stay locked up here. By teaching in both a university and a community college setting, I have the opportunity to get to teach a whole range of people. I've got your typical brilliant but kind of lost freshman. The midlife auto worker, I'm in the Detroit area, so I've got all the auto workers turned hopeful nursing students trying to find a job. To the old, and I'm actually here to learn something, wanderers. One of the best parts of teaching college students is that you get a fresh crop of brains every semester. The same way some people get excited for a new season, I get excited for their new beautiful brains. And like most teachers, I endeavor to force those brains to do philosophical somersaults. That's my job. Sometimes when you do a somersault, you fall off course and you learn something new. Sometimes you see things completely upside down. Sometimes, and most likely, you end up right back where you started. I will not ask you to perform any gymnastics this morning, but I will ask you the same question that I ask my students. The question is very simple, and yet it never elicits the same answer. I think it's an important question, as the answer provides the framework for so many of our most essential and incendiary issues. What is a person? What is a person? Now, I'd have to call on you if you're in my class and I'd make you start talking, but what is a person? It's a simple enough question. You are certainly a person. I am certainly a person. Yet every time I explore this teeny little question, I get very big answers. I've noticed that, like our perspectives, the answers are diverse. The answers to what is a person questions seem to come more easily to my younger students, and they take a lot more time for my older students to answer. The answers change throughout the semester and with major life events. Here's what I can tell you. According to federal law, you ready? According to federal law, human life begins at birth and ends at the irreversible cessation of cardiopulmonary or irreversible cessation of whole brain function. The legal definition of personhood has bookends. Legal life begins when you're out and ends when you're out. Okay? There is certainty in the legal definition of personhood. Can you imagine what the chaos would be if there wasn't? If you were a legal person before birth, how old would you be when you were born? 9 months, 38 weeks? What if you were a preemie? Okay. Conception dates are scientifically difficult and extremely socially awkward things to use as markers of time. You don't want to celebrate that. How would we treat the mentally ill if we couldn't legally determine if they're people? Would those whom we now treat as less than human actually be legally relegated to that status? Laws need nice, clear boundaries in order to be enforced. We generally know when birth happens. We generally know when the types of death I described happen. We can document it, measure it, rely on it. Everyone in the United States is bound by this legal definition of what it means to be a person. It's the framework for laws about adoption and organ donation and government benefits and taxes and murder. The old joke about death and taxes, once again true. This might shock you, but legal definitions, like laws themselves, can be spiritually limiting. Perhaps you've had the painful privilege of waiting for the inevitable death of a loved one. I've heard many families and their healthcare providers in anguish over the legal inability to declare a loved one dead. He's gone, the family whispers. I know, says the doctor, but I can't legally do anything yet. Have you ever heard discussions about the should? We should be able to do this for our loved one, or she should not have to sacrifice that. For centuries, philosophers have recognized that we as a civilization often yearn for a deeper understanding than that which is born out of political necessity. Legal definitions don't always work. And so, just like we've been honing our legal definition of personhood into those nice little bookends, we've also been struggling with the broader moral notion of what it means to be a person. The phrase moral personhood is used to describe an entity that we value, something we think should have rights and responsibilities. The entity may or may not meet the legal definition of person as well. Moral and legal don't always overlap. The obvious examples are always at the extremes. Are prenatal humans people? Legally, no, they're not. But perhaps morally, they do have some value, even if it's only in their potential. And what about those who are permanently unconscious? Legally, though they have lost forever all higher brain function, they are people. But when there's no aspect of self left, when all potential is gone, do we really have a person? What is a person? In contrast with the rigid, clinical, legal definition of personhood, there is intentional flexibility in moral definitions. Morals are normative. The moral definition of a person includes anything you value. You get to make your own definition of moral personhood. That's real chaos. Your definition may be different tomorrow than it is in 2 years' time, but that's the beauty when you talk in terms of morals. They're much easier to change than the law. And that's an intentional indictment of our very dysfunctional legal system, that we can change morals faster than a law. So if morals are flexible, if morals are individual, what matters to you? What does person mean to you? Since I know you haven't stretched, and I promise no mental gymnastics this morning, I'm going to give you some ideas. Consider it a warm-up for the thinking I hope you do later. You ready? Person. Here we go. What's a moral person? What type of entity should we value at the top of the moral food chain? These are the things philosophers think about when they talk about it. Does the person have to be an entity with human DNA? A lot of pet owners wouldn't say that. Science fiction fans wouldn't say that. Does a person have to be sentient, self-aware, be able to reason, have a heartbeat, have a brain, have a soul? Perhaps your definition for moral personhood is only that there is potential for some of these characteristics. You can change your definition as your life experiences change. Morality is relative. The only rule is that you have to be consistent with yourself. Once something counts as a person, it's all in. There's no half person, sort of person. You either count it in the bucket or you don't. Definitions are important. They put us on an even playing field. You can't have a fair sporting event if there aren't any rules. You can't have a productive discussion if you don't agree on the language that you're using. What is a person? I've given you two types, moral and legal. There's my teachers, sorry. 1, 2, we'll write them on the board. 1, 2 kinds. Moral and legal personhood, but it's not even noon, okay? And because I respect this church so much, I am not going to talk about religious personhood too. That's a whole nother kind. You guys are better than that. The descriptions of both moral and legal personhood share that core idea of inclusiveness. Once something is valued as a person, once it counts, we're all in. There is no gray area. Okay? It's a person or it's not. I'll be realistic. I don't think many people spend their precious free time thinking about what characteristics of personhood are important to them. Is that your summer beach, hanging out, thinking about personhood? Okay, that's your book. I think you should. I think you should spend time thinking about it. Immanuel Kant thought about moral personhood and decided that the ability to think rationally was absolutely essential. René Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." Sojourner Truth questioned moral and legal personhood when she asked, "Ain't I a woman?" James Watson, Francis Crick, Rosalind Franklin revolutionized our biological understanding of what it means to be a person. Jane Goodall made us question whether non-human primates could be people. Genetic technology will no doubt force us further to push and define our definitions of what we think a person means. And that's why I say my little question usually gets very big answers. What is a person? This brings me to you. One of my favorite parts of Fountain Street Church is that it's one of the very few places where I feel comfortable making assumptions. That's saying something, okay? Because this born into the faith liberal has been groomed since birth not to make an assumption about anyone at any time, because you don't know, okay? But I will go out on a limb, and I'm going to presume that perhaps some of you in this chapel, like me, have had the distinct honor of being the only out religious liberal in a room. I was in West Michigan. I'm in Ann Arbor now, it's different. You get to be the token, okay? In your one scenario, you get to live out the daily experience of every ethnic, racial, sexual, income, ability, and power minority. In that moment, regardless of whether you invited the conversation or invited the attention, you are your minority religious identity. Your voice represents every religious liberal in the world to that listener. I'm presuming you've had such a moment in your life. Maybe you've even dared speak your truth. But I'm making assumptions, and I didn't get to know you personally. I think my mom's here. Sorry. In my experience, the questions about my liberal religious perspective are usually phrased as inclusive with a decidedly combative undertone. I've heard phrases like, "Yes, but when it really comes down to it, you wouldn't do that, would you?" Or, "But that sort of thing is too extreme even for you." And my favorite, how can you call it a church when you don't even, and then fill in the blank with whatever we haven't done properly that day. When I was younger and more easily impressed with myself, I would defend my religiously liberal position as vehemently as necessary for that situation. But I'm older now, I'm wiser now, and I don't get enough sleep to take on those arguments. I let them fight with themselves. But if I can, I turn the conversation toward definitions. I bring up concepts that they've taken for granted. I ask them their views on personhood. You can't have a productive discussion if you don't agree on the terms. Any lawyer can tell you that. Any parent can tell you that. Definitions are important. So how can we talk about, argue about, scream about topics like abortion and euthanasia and gay rights and black justice, and when we don't have a framework for the common language of those discussions? This little trick of asking people, what is a person, or what does person mean to you, is giving me more traction than ever these days. It's helped me to handle some very intense conversations on a host of topics. And here are my tips for the Fountain Streeter stuck playing religious defense. Okay? I want to start with reproductive rights discussions. They're the easiest. We've got an election year coming, so women's bodies will be the natural jumping off point for all things political. So, reproductive rights discussions, they're one of the most easily adaptable to the personhood question. I use phrases like, do you think we'll ever be able to have a constructive national conversation about abortion when our country is so diverse that we can't even all agree on what's a person? That's academic lingo for what's a person. Okay? There's usually a pause, a moment while they process, while they tuck their brains into somersault position. When I hear someone suggest the importance of a new law or new procedure that values embryonic life over a woman's life, I ask, do you mean to imply a change in the legal definition of personhood and thereby force everyone in our country to agree with your view? Or are you just exploring your own notions of moral personhood and what it means to you? I don't know that I've converted anyone to a pro-choice position, but I suspect I have. But I do know that by talking about what it means to be a person, I've diffused a very tense topic, and I get to have a conversation. I also get to use the person question in conversations relating to justice issues. Personhood is an all or none concept. You either are or are not a person. Justice requires that we treat equal things equally. I'm veering, coming back. Equal things equally. Justice is about sorting things into groups. Okay? Saying it's not fair is just a shorthand way of saying those two things are equal. Why aren't we treating them the same way? Okay? For me, I'm usually asking, are we or are we not talking about people? Okay? Who is equal to whom? What definition are we using? Do only the rich get the privileges of personhood? Only whites or only heterosexuals or only third-generation citizens? Okay? Who gets to count on team person? What definition do you use? We amended the part of our Constitution that counted slaves as 3/5 of a person. Yet every time I hear of efforts to further disenfranchise poor and minority voters, to deny basic civil liberties to people because of who they love or how they identify, to deport undesirables, to kill unarmed black citizens, every time I hear of these situations, I have to ask, what is a person? Those who continue the rhetoric of demeaning exclusion rather than uplifting inclusion are giving us a clue as to their definition of moral personhood. No wonder some people need to be reminded that Black lives matter. That's a very simple assertion of personhood. I use personhood during discussions of reproductive rights, end-of-life care, feminism, and in most issues of justice. Anytime we have to decide who gets access to health care, or marriage, or civil liberties, or government benefits, or military service, or financial aid, or political power, I start by asking, who do we mean by who? I ask, what is a person? Of course, my what is a person question won't get you out of every uncomfortable discussion you encounter, but it applies more often than you think. Just ask me about the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United granting free speech rights to corporations. Or ask me about their Hobby Lobby decision, treating closely held corporations as having religious freedom of expression. Is a corporation a person? You know what you'll hear from me. So if you ever find yourself at a table as the sole voice of a religious liberal, and if you feel you must perform, feel free to use my trick of defining the terms before you even start the discussion. Ask simple little questions like, what is a person? And see if you get very big answers. You might be doing somersaults. You might fall off course and learn something new. You might see things completely upside down. And it is very likely that you will end up right back where you started. At least, however, rather than an argument, you get to have a conversation. And if humility isn't part of personhood, then what is? Amen.